The Ariete PSO main battle tank used to be one of the most feared tanks in War Thunder. This was due to it being the only main battle tank to carry the infamous CL-3143 round, capable of over 600mm of penetration. Now with the T-90A, Leopard 2A6, and most other nations receiving high penetration rounds for their tanks, where does this leave the Ariete? Is it still one of the best tanks in game, or has it lost its main advantage? Alright lads, today we're going to be taking a look at the weapons and performance of the Ariete PSO. Starting as always with the basics, this vehicle is a rank 7 battle rating 10.7 main battle tank located in the Italian tech tree. Being a rank 7 tech tree vehicle, it will come stock and will have to be upgraded to unlock its full potential. It will also only be effective at grinding vehicles between the ranks of 6 and 7. To unlock this tank, you'll have to grind out 400,000 research points before purchasing the tank for a cost of 1,030,000 silver lions. You will then have to crew the vehicle for the cost of an additional 300,000 silver lions. To purchase the Expert and Ace qualifications for the tank, it will cost you 1,030,000 silver lions and 2,100 golden eagles respectively. The PSO also has a fairly high repair cost of 11,764 silver lions, giving you a higher repair cost than the M1A2 Abrams, the Leopard 2A6 and the T-90U, arguably some of the best tanks in the game. So judging by this high repair cost, this tank has to be good, right? Before we get into that, we'll first cover the rewards. This vehicle has a base RP modifier of 2.38, which gives you an RP modifier of 238% with a free-to-play account and 476% with a premium account. Your silver line modifier of 1.5 is one of the highest available in the game, and you're gonna need it with that incredibly high repair cost. You can expect a 150% silver line modifier with a free-to-play account and 225% with a premium account. In terms of customization, we have several camouflages available to purchase, including woodland, desert and winter camouflage schemes, as well as one camouflage available on the Guardian Marketplace. Being the only battle rating 10.7 Italian vehicle, the tank has a fairly lonely lineup at 10.7. Luckily for you, the Italians have a wealth of competitive 10.3 vehicles, such as the Centauro MGS, Automatic and the base Ariete. Alright lads, just letting you know I now have a Twitter account. I'm using the handle SAKO Sniper. I have also created a second channel, which is where I'll be uploading live comms. I know most of you are here for reviews, so if you are interested in more laid back gameplay, then feel free to subscribe. Okay, so starting as always with the engine and performance, and the PSO is powered by an engine producing 1,300 horsepower. Combined with the vehicle's weight of 53.8 tonnes, the tank has a fairly decent power to weight ratio of 24.2 horsepower per tonne. This is pretty good for a NATO vehicle and outpowers most Soviet bloc tanks. Moving on to the transmission, and we can see that the Ariete has a top speed of 65 km per hour and a decent reverse speed of 31 km per hour. While these top speeds are good, there is a problem. It feels like the acceleration in this tank is very poor, regardless of the high power to weight ratio. I think this is due to the gearing. Only having 4 forward gears, it means the torque feels very low. It's like trying to start a car moving in 3rd gear. It just doesn't feel like there's any power in this engine. Being a top tier NATO main battle tank, the Ariete naturally has the ability to neutral steer, and your whole traverse rate is very high. This gives you very good low speed manoeuvrability, allowing you to brawl in urban maps. Overall, the mobility of the Ariete is pretty poor. It just doesn't have that high top speed that is needed in top tier battles. While the tank can theoretically reach a top speed of 65 km per hour, it never achieves the speed in most battles. It feels like this tank is left behind by contemporary American, German, Soviet and French main battle tanks, with the Ariete only really outpacing tanks such as the Challenger 2s and ZTZ-99s. Okay, moving on to the armor survivability, and the first thing to mention is that the PSO has a crew of 4 men. While normally this would give you pretty good survivability, as you can see, the crew of the Ariete are conveniently lined up. The driver, gunner and commander are all in a nice straight line, and as we'll see shortly, the armour of this tank won't save the crew. Like all other top tier main battle tanks, the Ariete is plastered with composite armour on the upper hull and turret. This gives you substantial protection against chemical energy weapons, as well as a small amount of protection against kinetic energy penetrators. However, unlike most other top tier tanks, the Ariete does not feature any sort of blowout panels in the turret bustle. Like earlier Cold War vehicles, the Ariete holds its first stage ammunition directly next to the gunner, and the remainder of the ammunition is located next to the driver. This is a similar ammunition loadout to the Leopard A1A1. Just like shooting the left hand side of the tank will kill 3 crew members, instantly killing the tank, shooting the right hand side of the tank will result in an ammunition detonation, also instantly killing the tank. It's not looking great for the Ariete so far. Moving on to the armour performance itself, and to test this, we'll be using the 3BM42M shell fired by the T-90A. starting as always with the lower frontal plate, and as you can see the armour protection ranges from 84mm all the way up to above 171mm of armour. This is due to the large composite block sitting just behind the lower frontal plate. This plate however is pretty ineffective, and it does not cover the whole of the lower plate, only the top half, leaving the lower part extremely vulnerable to both kinetic and chemical warheads. Like other NATO tanks, the upper frontal plate is relatively lightly armoured, only giving around 250mm of protection, pretty weak compared to most Soviet top tier tanks. While this is nominally quite low, the upper frontal plate is extremely well angled at around 80 degrees, giving any incoming rounds a pretty good chance to bounce. As we move up to the turret, you can see that the cheeks are pretty much easily penetrated by all top tier rounds, only providing around 380mm of armour against a top Soviet shell. One slight upside however, is that the gun breech of the PSO is a similar thickness to the cheeks, again providing around 380mm of armour. If we turn the camera to the side of the vehicle, protection decreases substantially, down to around 120mm at the front, dropping as low as 62mm in some areas. However, we move up to the turret, the protection at the front is actually pretty good, but as we move down the length of the turret, your protection decreases, down to around 100mm in the crew compartment, and only 70mm around the turret bustle. And finally, the rear of the turret provides 30mm of armour, and the rear of the hull provides just 20mm of armour. Overall, the armour and survivability are incredibly poor, borderline useless in top tier War Thunder. Your crew and ammunition layout make you incredibly vulnerable to incoming rounds, and your lack of an effective armour scheme means 99% of all rounds that hit will penetrate. We also saw in the last segment that the mobility of this tank is also subpar, leaving the PSO feeling like a slightly more mobile Leopard A1A1. Moving on to the weapons and ammunition, and as you can see the PSO is armed with a 120mm auto breather cannon, essentially a clone of the infamous 120mm L44 Rheinmetall gun. Being a modern vehicle, the gun is fully stabilised in both the vertical and horizontal planes. The Ariete also has the NATO standard 20 degrees of gun elevation and 10 degrees of gun depression, allowing you to peek over hills and ridgelines very well. You can carry 42 rounds in total, with 15 of those rounds being classed as first stage ammunition, as we've mentioned, being stored next to the gunner. It doesn't really matter if you take more than 15 rounds into a battle with this tank, as all of your ammunition is vulnerable. So taking a look at the reloading skill under the loader section, and you can see that we have a base reload speed of 7.8 seconds, which drops down to 6 seconds with an ace crew. While not as good as the Challenger 2, it is average for NATO tanks. When aced, it is also faster reloading than both the Soviet and Chinese autoloaders. Not great, but not terrible. Moving on to the targeting skill under the gunner section, and we can see that you have a base turret rotation speed of 28 degrees per second, which rises to 40 degrees per second with an ace crew. This gives you pretty snappy turret rotation, allowing you to easily react to an enemy, useful if an enemy shoots out your engine and you need to kill them before they reload. Next we move on to the modifications, and I want to point out that this tank gets access to both a laser rangefinder and a laser warning receiver, as well as second generation thermal imaging for the gunner and commander's sights. You also have a pretty disappointing field of view in the gunner sight, as well as a base 8x magnification and an optional 12x magnification. This allows you to easily hit targets at long range, but the tight field of view does leave you rather tunnel visioned. My advice would be use the commander's sight for scouting, only using the gunner sight once a target has been acquired. Moving on to the ammunition, and we have 3 rounds available, 1 stock and 2 unlockable. Your stock round is the DM12A heater fast shell. It travels at 1140 meters per second and can penetrate 480mm of armour. This round is a little underwhelming at top tier, especially with all the composite and ERA armour packages at battle rating 10.7. Your next round is the DM33 shell. This is a tier 1 modification and should be unlocked as soon as you have parts and FPE. It travels at 1640 meters per second and can penetrate 481mm of flat armour, and against armour angled at 60 degrees, it manages a respectable 278mm of armour. Your final round is the CL3143 shell. This is arguably one of the best rounds in the game, only being eclipsed by the German DM53 round. It travels at a whopping 1705 meters per second and can penetrate 625mm of flat armour, and against armour angled at 60 degrees, it manages an impressive 361mm of armour penetration. The PSO also has 3 rifle caliber machine guns, 1 mounted coaxially and 2 mounted on top of the turret fired by the commander. You also have 8 smoke grenades, which fire all at once, giving you a single smoke screen. Overall, the firepower of the Ariete PSO is pretty good. Its main rounds used to distinguish it from all other main battle tanks in the game, but with the latest updates, pretty much all other nations now have a powerful main round, seriously diminishing your main advantage. To be honest, the other systems of this tank are pretty mediocre. The reload is average, the optics are average, the field of view is actually below average, and all these things combined with the mediocre mobility and poor survivability leaves this tank to get bullied by the other much more meta main battle tanks. To conclude, the Ariete PSO is a decent vehicle, but it is far from the meta. It has a powerful gun and average mobility, but it's let down by its poor survivability. The lack of blow-up panels forces you to carry ammunition in the middle of the hull. This issue, combined with your poor armour, leads to a lot of one-shot kills. As I've said in the past, it's mobility that is the most important factor of a tank's performance, so the shortcomings in the survivability may not be a huge issue for experienced players, but for newer players, the Ariete lacks the stubbornness to dive found on many Soviet and American vehicles. But there are positives. The gun and ammunition are both very powerful, only being beaten by the Leopard 2A6's DM53 shell. This makes the tank a point-and-click adventure, especially against the squishier NATO tank it frequently fights. This high-performance ammunition used to be the balancing force of the Arietes. They had poor armour, but with a high penetration gun. Now in 2021, all other nations now have high-performance APF-SDS rounds, removing the old selling point of the Ariete. While the optics of this tank are a little bit dated, the thermals are very good, giving you better thermal coverage than both the M1A2 and the Leopard 2A6. Overall, the Ariete has a similar mobility to the T90A, the firepower of the Leopard 2A6, and the survivability of the R3. It's important to remember, this is just my opinion. What do you guys think of this pasta tank? If you have any questions, criticism, positive or negative, or would even like to request a review, then please feel free to leave a comment below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if I did my job correctly, hopefully you should have learned something new about this vehicle. If you do enjoy these sorts of videos, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. But more importantly lads, I hope you have a great day, and thank you very much for watching.